And we can begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And today is April 17th, 2021. And we're continuing now our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours. And today we'll be taking two suttas which have a very similar structure, but set up a contrast, a very interesting contrast between two perspectives on the manifestation of the Buddha in the world. So both suttas speak about four Acharya Abhuta Dhammas, that is, four astounding and amazing things that occur when the Buddha appears in the world, when the Buddha arises in the world. Okay, so we start with sutta number 127. And we could say that maybe sutta number 127 presents these astounding and amazing things from the perspective of, we call this devotional faith, religious veneration, and the parallel sutta number 128 presents four astounding and amazing things, maybe from the perspective of meditative cultivation or the aspiration for liberation. So maybe we could say that number 127 is almost like a skillful means to draw people of faith temperament to the Dhamma and lead them in deepening their commitment to the Dhamma. Whereas sutta number 128 is directed towards people who incline towards appreciating the Dhamma with wisdom. So it emphasizes more a wisdom-based approach to the Dhamma. And maybe these two suttas highlight the contrast between those who enter the path. There's a contrast between the sadhanusari, who is the faith follower, and the dhammanusari, who is the wisdom follower. Do you see that there's a call out box appear?
Yes, Bhante.
Yes,
There's a
Bhante.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so technically the sadhanusari is one who has entered the irreversible liberating path by using faith as the primary faculty that motivates practice. And the dhammanusari is one, in the technical sense, who enters the liberating path using investigative wisdom as the primary instrument of, or the primary motivation for practice. But in a less technical, more general way, we might see these two expressions to refer to the temperaments of two different types of practitioners. Maybe in the language of the Visuddhimagga, with its classification of character types, we could say that sutta number 127 is directed towards the Sada Charita, the one whose temperament, primarily the strongest quality or disposition in that person's temperament, is faith and devotion. Whereas sutta number 128, you could say, is directed towards the person with, this is the Visuddhimagga terminology, the Buddhi Charita. So the Buddhi is the faculty or capacity for wisdom, for intelligence. Okay, so let us take a look at 127. So it speaks about 4 astounding and amazing things that take place with the manifestation, with the arising of the Tathagata, the Arahat, the perfectly enlightened one. So what are these 4? So the first, it says that when a bodhisattva passes away from the Tusita heaven, he does so with mindfulness and clear comprehension. With mindfulness and clear comprehension, he passes away from the Tusita heaven and enters his mother's womb. And when this happens, then in this world, with all of its various types of beings, a measureless, glorious radiance becomes manifest, surpassing the divine majesty of the devas, of the gods. So let's just go back and then sort of parse this statement. First, it speaks about the bodhisattva passing away from the Tusita heaven. So now we have the question, what is a bodhisattva, and how does he get into Tusita heaven, and why is he passing away from Tusita heaven? First, a bodhisattva is a person or a being who is bound to attain the full enlightenment of Buddhahood. And later texts make gradations amongst different stages of bodhisattvahood, the different stages through which a bodhisattva passes in order to become fixed and determined, bound by destiny to attain Buddhahood. But in the Theravada tradition, the decisive event in the spiritual evolution or development of the person who is to become our Buddha, the Buddha that we call Gautama or Shakyamuni Buddha, took place many, many aeons ago in the past. I want to get the Do you see the Word file that I just opened up?
No, Bhante.
Yeah, I'm going to go out. Oh, then I have to set everything up. Okay, I'll put it in a note file. Okay, many, many aeons ago, there was a Buddha in the world whose name was Dipankara. This was 24 Buddhas in the past. And then the person who was to become our Buddha, Gautama Buddha, he was born into a wealthy family. I believe it was a Brahmin family. His parents passed away when he was young, and so he inherited a great amount of wealth. But then he, through his innate intelligence, he reflected on that wealth, and he realized this wealth is impermanent, and my life is impermanent. And so there's no purpose just remaining in the household life and enjoying the use of my wealth. Let me go forth and become an ascetic. And so he became an ascetic by the name of Sumedha. Sometimes they call him Sumedha Tapasa, the ascetic Sumedha. And he lived in seclusion, practiced meditation, and through his practice, he mastered the 8 meditative absorptions and the different kinds of mundane psychic powers. And one day when he came down from his hermitage to go on alms round, he saw that there was a lot of excitement in the city. I think the city was called Hangsavati. People were all excited. They were decorating the city, setting up bouquets of flowers and paving the road. And so he inquired, what's going on? Why is there all of these decorations being set up? And the whole city is being beautified. And then they told him that the Buddha Dipankara, together with his Sangha of disciples, has arrived at our city. And today he'll be entering the city and giving a Dharma talk. And so when Sumedha heard this, he was very, very excited, exhilarated. And he saw that people were paving the road, preparing the road. And he asked if he could also contribute to the preparations. And so the people told him, just you join us and help us to pave the road. And then as he was paving the road, and cleaning the road, the Buddha Dipankara, together with his assembly of monastic disciples, came walking down the road to the region that Sumedha was paving. And just in the region in front of Sumedha, there was a pool of mud, a stretch of mud. And so Sumedha prostrated his body over the muddy area, and he invited the Buddha Dipankara to walk over his body so that his feet would not get soiled by the mud. And while he was lying there in the mud, looking up at the Buddha and seeing the glorious figure of the Buddha, there formed in his mind the wish, may I at some future time become a fully enlightened Buddha, just like Dipankara, in order to create the opportunity to lead countless human beings and devas across samsara to the far shore of Nibbana. And so he formed this very strong aspiration or vow in his mind. And when Dipankara came before the ascetic Sumedha, he looked down at him and he realized the vow that Sumedha had made in his mind. And then he thought to himself, will this vow succeed? Will it be realized? And when that question arose in his mind, then he realized that so many aeons in the future, after another 23 Buddhas have come and gone, this ascetic Sumedha will become a Buddha by the name of Gautama. And then he turned to the entire assembly around him, both the monks and the lay people who were around, and said, do you see this ascetic lying here in the mud? In the future, this ascetic will become a fully enlightened Buddha and establish the Dhamma in the world. And then he didn't walk over the ascetic, but instead, together with his monks, he walked around the ascetic and came back onto the paved portion of the road. So that marked an event that is called in in technical terms, the word that's used is vyakarana or vyakarana, which means the prediction or the prophecy. That means, and when the Buddha gives somebody the prediction or the prophecy of their future attainment of Buddhahood or arhatship, it means that that person is niyata. It means that they're fixed in destiny, that they're bound to reach the fulfillment of their aspiration. So at this point, the ascetic Sumedha becomes, maybe use the expression, a niyata bodhisattva, a bodhisattva who is fixed in destiny, irreversible, bound to attain Buddhahood in the future. But to attain Buddhahood in the future, the predestined or the destined bodhisattva has to fulfill the requisites for attaining Buddhahood. He has to practice the, I think it's called the Buddha Kara Dhamma, the Dhammas that lead to Buddhahood, that create Buddhahood. And those Dhammas that create Buddhahood are what we know as the, paramis. Oh, I see. Or paramitas. These supreme virtues or spiritual perfections. So in the Pali tradition, there are 10 paramitas that a future Buddha, the Bodhisattva, has to fulfill to attain Buddhahood. So that is the practice of giving, then sila, moral discipline, nekama, renunciation, panya, wisdom, virya, energy, kanti, patience, satya, truthfulness, adhitthana, determination, metta, loving kindness, and upekkha, equanimity. In the northern tradition, particularly in the Mahayana Sutras, there are 6 paramitas. Again, giving, sila, moral discipline. Then comes kshanti, patience, virya, energy. Then dhyana, meditation, and prajna, wisdom. So 6 paramitas, but also 4 additional qualities that a bodhisattva has to fulfill. Those are what we call the 4 immeasurables or brahmaviharas: boundless maitri, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, altruistic joy, and upeksha, equanimity. So really 10 qualities, 6 paramitas and the 4 brahmaviharas, as well as many other qualities. So for lifetime after lifetime, over many aeons, our bodhisattva practiced and fulfilled those 10 paramitas, including the 4 brahmaviharas, until it's said to be like a fixed rule that in his next to last existence, the bodhisattva is always born into the Tusita heaven. And so the Tusita heaven is one of the 6 sense-sphere heavenly worlds. So the lowest is the heaven of the 4 great kings. Then comes the Tavatimsa heaven. Then comes the Yama heaven. And then the 4th is the Tusita heaven, the heaven of the contented ones. And then the Bodhisattva remains there all his life until conditions are right and proper in the human world for him to descend and attain Buddhahood. And so when the conditions are, so at a certain point, the Bodhisattva will reflect and consider, are the conditions right for me to descend and attain Buddhahood? And then he has to consider, what is the lifespan, the normal lifespan of the human realm down on earth? If the lifespan is too long, it's not the right time, because people will be too negligent. If the lifespan is too short, it's not the right time, because then one doesn't get to live the full normal lifespan. So the right time is when the lifespan is, a full lifespan is somewhere between 80 and 120 years. Then he has to determine the right country. And it's said that the Bodhisattva will always choose Jambudvipa, that is the Indian subcontinent, to attain Buddhahood. Then he has to choose the right mother. And in the case of our Bodhisattva, he chose the woman who is called Mahamaya. So there are a number of other considerations, but those are three of the major considerations. So when all of those considerations were appropriate, then the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven with the intention of coming into the human realm, and in the human realm, attaining Buddhahood. And when he passes away with sati sampajanya, with mindfulness and with clear comprehension. And not only does he pass away with mindfulness and clear comprehension, but when he enters into the mother's womb, he maintains that mindfulness and clear comprehension, full awareness. And it's said that even during his duration, the stay in the mother's womb, he maintains mindfulness and clear comprehension. How that's possible in the early stages of the embryo when it's just one cell, multiple cells, I don't know. But this is what is said. Okay, now when the Bodhisattva enters the mother's womb, what happens, according to this text, is that a measureless, glorious radiance appears. And so why this measureless, glorious radiance appears? This is a kind of token, right, or a foresign or sign, or a token of that this person who's just, or this being who's just entered the mother's womb is going to attain supreme Buddhahood. And that radiance is said to be to surpass the divine majesty of the devas, of the gods. So the gods in their heavens, no matter what heaven it might be, they all emit a bright and brilliant light. But the light that appears in the world when the Bodhisattva takes conception is said to be even more glorious than the light of the gods. And it's said, then the next passage speaks about certain world interviews. These are spaces between different world systems, which is said to be regions of gloom and thick darkness, where the light of the sun does not reach. Even there, that glorious radiance, which surpasses the divine majesty of the gods, even there, that measureless, glorious radiance became manifest, so that the beings who were dwelling there, invisible to each other, by the light of that radiance, were able to see each other. So that is said to be the first astounding and amazing thing that occurred when the Tathagata was preparing to take birth into this world, when the Buddha passed away from the Tusita heaven and entered his mother's womb. And it might seem that this is just a superstitious belief that arose out of the faith of the Indian Buddhists, but to me it seems in a way comprehensible. I've heard and read about, in the case of a number of great Buddhist masters, even in the 20th century and earlier times, 19th century, 20th century, when they were born, or even when they were conceived, some kind of supernatural signs appeared to indicate their future spiritual realization. And not only in the case of Buddhists, but also the case of some Hindu sages like Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, and others. It's like wondrous signs occurred to indicate the future attainment and realization. So it seems to me perfectly understandable that we have a bodhisattva who, over many, many aeons, has fulfilled all of these very demanding qualities, who's reached the peak in generosity, in patience, in loving kindness, compassion, equanimity. And so all of those, the power, the spiritual power of those virtues would be inherent within the stream of consciousness of the bodhisattva. And now it's determined that in this life to come, the bodhisattva is going to attain the highest possible spiritual realization of any being in the world, the attainment of supreme Buddhahood. So it seems almost inevitable that when that being passes away from his penultimate existence and enters the mother's womb, that there are going to be some signs of his future attainment. And since the attainment of Sammasambodhi itself unleashes the brilliant radiance of wisdom, the appropriate visible counterpart of that would be the appearance of a glorious radiant light. Okay, so this takes place even with the passing away and entry into the womb. And then the same thing occurs when the bodhisattva emerges from his mother's womb. He emerges from the mother's womb again with mindfulness and clear comprehension. And then a measureless, glorious radiance appears. And that is all that is said in this sutta. But if we go to the Majjhima Nikaya, sutta number 123, called the Acharya Abhuta Sutta, the discourse on wonderful and marvelous things. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so what happens when the bodhisattva is born? Not only does a radiant light appear, okay, so now I'm reading from the sutta. As soon as the Bodhisattva was born, he stood firmly with his feet on the ground. And then he took 7 steps facing north. He surveyed each direction, and then he uttered the words, I am the highest in the world. I am the best in the world. I am the foremost in the world. This is my last birth. Now there is no more renewal of existence. Okay, maybe we'll just finish the sutta, then I could take questions. Okay, so this is the birth of the Bodhisattva. And then we come to the 3rd occasion when this glorious radiance appears in the world. So that is when now he's called not the Bodhisattva, but the Tathagata. When the Tathagata awakens to or attains the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment, then a measureless, glorious radiance appears, because that is the fulfillment of his aspiration. The fulfillment of his determination was to achieve Buddhahood. And now with the attainment of the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment, now he achieves Buddhahood. So to mark that attainment, this measureless, glorious radiance appears. And then he aspired to attain Buddhahood, not for his own liberation alone, but in order to be able to teach the Dharma to the world, in order to lead across, to transport across countless living beings, to be able to serve as the guide or the sutta, the supreme teacher, Deva Manusana, the teacher of devas and human beings. And in order to become the teacher of devas and human beings, the Buddha has to teach the Dharma. And he begins teaching the Dharma when he gives his first discourse. And the giving of the first discourse is technically, it's called setting in motion the wheel of the Dharma. And so it said the 4th occasion when this measureless, glorious radiance becomes manifest is when the Tathagata sets in motion the unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma. And so this is when he gave his first discourse in the deer park at Benares to the 5 ascetics who had been attending upon him during his period of struggle and striving. And so that is the discourse in which he first expounds the 4 noble truths and the noble eightfold path. So in a sense, to celebrate or commemorate that setting in motion the wheel of Dharma, the heavens themselves become filled with this measureless, glorious radiance. And not only that, but it said that when the Buddha gave that discourse, even the earth itself, or the world system itself, the 10,000-fold world system, shaked and quaked and trembled as a kind of way of celebrating the setting in motion the wheel of the Dharma. And so those are the 4 astounding and amazing things, or the 4 wonderful and amazing things that occur with the appearance, the manifestation of the Tathagata Arhat, perfectly enlightened one. Okay, maybe now we could see if there are any questions arising from the sutta, and we could take, I see a hand up already, Samantha.
Yes, Bhante, thank you for taking my question. I just got a bit confused. I was just wondering, the two questions. The first question is, when Buddha was born, did he, I think Bhante said that it was said that he said that, proclaimed that this is his last birth and
Yeah,
he was going to get enlightened. But then when he was born, he himself went through the period of finding the truth
yeah,
through trial and
yeah,
error.
yeah,
He went through, annihilating the body, and then that wasn't the path, and then indulgence, and he came through the middle. He,
yeah,
found the middle path, etc. So, and then he got the came to the truth as the enlightened one, the supreme enlightened one, at the end.
yeah.
So that's the first question. I got a bit confused. So whether he at birth, did he actually know he was going to? It didn't doesn't seem to be. He knew he was going to be the Buddha because he went through that trial and error period. And secondly,
But let's take one question at a time.
oh, yeah,
Otherwise, I get confused.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante.
But it's a good question, and it raises the question: is this incident reported in the Majjhima Nikaya, and again, it's repeated in almost all the narrative accounts of the Buddha's career, of taking the 7 steps immediately after coming out from the womb and pointing above and below and making that declaration? Is it to be taken literally, or is it to be taken figuratively as a way of maybe arousing the devotion of the faithful?
Mm,
I mean, to us, with our modern sort of scientific understanding, or just not even scientific understanding, but the normal experience of observing what takes place when a baby is born. I mean, this is just mind-boggling that this can take place. How can a baby just born take 7 steps and even talk, even to say, mommy, daddy, they won't say, let alone to declare that they're going to be the supreme in the world. So, I just don't know how to take it. Maybe it's extraordinary that a bodhisattva, a future Buddha, has that ability.
yeah.
Nobody had a video recorder or an iPhone with a video capacity at that time. Too bad. And so
Yeah.
we're just left with that,
That supreme, yeah,
with that question.
question.
Okay, your
And
second question?
just quickly, Bhante, I've also heard about this, the next Buddha to be, the Maitri Buddha.
Yeah,
So where is that coming from? And what's this, the evidence behind that, Bhante?
actually within the Nikayas, or the canonical texts of early Buddhism, Maitreya, or in the Pali Maitreya, is mentioned only in one sutta, which is in the Digha Nikaya. It's number 26, the Chakravarti Sihanada Sutta, where the Buddha speaks about how as time goes on, people become more corrupt and violent and destructive, and then the lifespan gradually decreases until it reaches the lowest limit of, I think, 10 years. And then there comes a period of mass destruction and mutual annihilation. And then people come to their senses and then gradually start to practice virtue again. And as they practice virtue, then the lifespan starts to lengthen until it comes to, I think it's a period of 20,000 years of the human life. And then at that time, it's said that a Buddha named Maitreya, or in Sanskrit, Maitreya, will arise in the world and again proclaim the Dhamma. So that's the source for the idea of Maitreya, or Maitreya, who then becomes incorporated into virtually all Buddhist traditions, with many sort of narrative accounts about him. According to some traditions, the future Maitreya during the time of Gautama Buddha was a monk by the name of Ajita. But this is in maybe some Sanskrit texts, maybe they're Mahayana texts. But I looked up, out of curiosity, I looked up Ajita in Malalasekara's Dictionary of Pali Proper Names, and there is no account of an Ajita who was to become the future Maitreya, who was a monk in the Buddha's teaching, in the Buddha's Sangha. The Buddha did have several disciples, monastic and lay, named Ajita, but none of them is said to have been the future Buddha Maitreya.
Did the Buddha actually himself made this prophecy?
Excuse me?
Did the Buddha himself made this prophecy of the Maitreya?
The Buddha does speak about Maitreya as the Buddha who's to come in the future, but he doesn't, in the Pali text, he doesn't point to any disciple and say, this disciple of mine is the one who is going to be the Buddha Maitreya in the future.
Lovely. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, we go to Vinyu.
Yep. Good morning, Bhante. I have two questions. The first question is that regarding the Buddha Kassapa. During Buddha Kassapa time, as I recall, that our Buddha Gautama was Jyotipala, and somehow he was able to recall under the Bodhi tree that he was Jyotipala, and that he came under the tutorship of Buddha Kassapa before he got the enlightenment.
Yeah.
And my question is that, is it possible that when Buddha was born, he's already an Arya? That means that he's an Anagami, the second stage. And during the Buddha Dipankara, he's actually a Sotapan. So,
No. I mean, that there would be no basis for that within the Pali text. That is said that when the Buddha is born as a bodhisattva, he is still not yet reached any of the Aryan stages, and that he goes, well, there's nothing that speaks about him going through, at least within the suttas, going through the 4 stages under the Bodhi tree. It's just that he goes, all that is said is that at the end of his experience under the Bodhi tree, he comes out as an Arahat, who's also a Sammasambuddha. But there's no suggestion anywhere that he was, if he was a Sotapanna under Dipankara Buddha, then he would have had only 7 more existences. And so he could not have fulfilled the Bodhisattva career to become a Buddha. Okay. And if he was an Anagami under the Buddha Kassapa, then he would have been reborn in the form realm under the condition that he would never have been able to return or come back from the form realm or the pure abodes back into the human world.
So Sakadagami, no? Even on the second level?
No, there's no indication of that.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
My second question is this. I think in one of the sutta I can recall is that the Buddha said, where he went through many world cycles, he saw 6 Sammasambuddha. So my question is that, who are they? Who are the other 6 Sammasambuddha apart from him? Would you happen to have the name?
Yeah, he would have actually probably encountered, I would assume he would have encountered all of the Buddhas from Dipankara up through Kassapa. So the 6, the Buddhas who are mentioned in the earlier suttas as the predecessors of Gautama Buddha are Vipassi, Sikhi, Vesabu, Kakusanda, Konagamana, Kassapa. So those are the 6. And then the next one is Gautama or Shakyamuni.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sadhu, sadhu, thank you. That's all I have. All right, thank you.
Okay, Ali.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
I have 2 quick questions. If we are not to interpret these literally in the first 2 suttas you were referring to, can the faith and the wisdom part be interpreted as a love and wisdom side of the practice, as the bird that's flying with both sides? That's the first
Say
question.
again, I didn't quite catch it. Say again.
You were referring to two suttas. One of them was just pointing out the faith portion, and the second sutta you were referring was the wisdom side.
Yeah.
Can we take that as the bird flying with with two wings of the love and the wisdom part for any human being?
Yeah. Usually when they speak about the two wings, they speak about wisdom and compassion as being the two wings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. But then can we just say maybe the literal, not if you don't take these literally, I mean, the faith and the wisdom can be translated at the, wisdom and the compassion or love or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question is that could it be that the second Maitri coming in, I've heard that might be the Sangha instead of a personal Buddha or a Buddha? Is that maybe?
I know I've heard that statement from Thich Nhat Hanh, who said,
yes,
maybe the next Buddha is going to be a Sangha. But that seems to be an original idea of Thich Nhat Hanh. It's certainly not in agreement with the mainstream Buddhist tradition, which says that a Buddha is always an individual person who attains full Buddhahood. And I think Thich Nhat Hanh probably doesn't really intend that statement to be taken literally, but maybe he's just making it as a sort of, call it a skillful means to emphasize the importance of having a Sangha or a community. But certainly the Buddhist tradition has always held that the Buddha who appears in the world is an individual person who attains full enlightenment.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, Marcel.
Good morning, Bhante. Thanks
Morning.
for taking my question. Talking about Buddhahood, I have read Bhante's essay titled Arahants, Bodhisattvas, and Buddhas.
Yeah.
I think it's a very well-balanced essay, and it does make me appreciate the teachings of different Buddhist traditions.
Yeah.
And my question is, given that the Buddha did not teach the Bodhisattva path, then how valid is the current teaching about the Bodhisattva path?
I mean, I'm not one who's entitled to judge validity, but let's say it would seem to me quite reasonable that if somebody is going to become a Sammasambuddha, that they have to fulfill certain qualities that go beyond the qualities that are necessary to achieve, let's say, an individual enlightenment. Because somebody who's going to become a fully enlightened Buddha has to be able to serve, to function as a universal teacher, a world teacher. And so it seems that the character of a Buddha has to be fully balanced in bringing to the ultimate pinnacle a variety of outstanding qualities. And so it's quite acceptable to me that those would be the qualities that are expressed and embedded within whether the 10 paramitas of the Pali tradition or the 6 paramitas and the 4 Brahmaviharas of the Northern Mahayana tradition. So if a teaching emphasizes the fulfillment of those 10 or 10 qualities in whichever tradition, then that seems to me to be the essential prerequisites for attaining Buddhahood. So that I would say would certainly be valid in my opinion. And I should maybe in this context, I'll add, I've heard or I've read from some scholars, including one who used to be a student of mine, who's now a very prominent textually based Buddhist scholar, that they base themselves on, there's an incident that takes place after the Buddha attains enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And then he's reflecting, should I go out and teach the Dhamma to the world? And then as he's reflecting, he sees the Dharma is very deep, difficult to understand. Human beings are corrupted by greed and hatred and ignorance. It's too difficult to teach the Dhamma. Better that I just live quietly and pass my days peacefully. And then at that point, Brahma Sahampati comes from the Brahma world down to the Buddha, down in front of the Buddha, and then appeals to the Buddha, please, Bhante, the world is enveloped in darkness. Go out and teach the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand. And then the Buddha reflects again and then makes the decision to go out and teach. So some of these scholars then base themselves on that passage and say that in the tradition of early Buddhism, it's possible that the Buddha would not have taught the Dhamma, that he could have just kept silent and enjoyed the peace of liberation himself, and then passed away into nirvana without teaching. And so for them, that shows that the tradition that the Buddha was bound to achieve Buddhahood, even from the moment of his birth, is just a later legend or later development. But I understand that incident with Mahabrahma very, very differently. I see this almost as a dramatic enactment intended as a kind of maybe pedagogical device, a teaching device in order to instill faith and appreciation for the precious nature of the Dhamma, and to generate devotion towards the Buddha for his decision to teach. Yeah, there are many ways to interpret that, but I think that there are enough passages within the text that show that already from birth, that the Buddha was bound to achieve, that the Bodhisattva was bound to achieve Buddhahood and to take on that role of being a world teacher. So that that incident under the Bodhi tree has to be interpreted in the light of other passages which show that the Buddha or the Bodhisattva was bound on attaining Buddhahood, was bound to go on to take on the role of being a world teacher. Okay, I want to take some other questions. Okay, we see Sandy. Please lower the hand.
Monday is Johnny and Sandy.
Oh, Johnny, I see.
It just happened. You just answered my question. I was about to raise the question of Brahman Sambhapati. So you just answered my question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Ivan.
Vandami Bande. So, Bande, so I guess that there's one time maybe our Venerable Sariputta had inquired with Buddha about what is the way to become a Buddha. So in that maybe it was the Mahabodhiyana Sutta. And is it suitable to understand that this particular sutta perhaps lays some of the grounds for the Bodhisattva path?
Where is that sutta?
Mahabodhiyana. And then it talks about the Sammasambodhi, and then the Pacceka Bodhi and the Savaka Bodhi.
I'd have to check to see where it is.
Okay, so
perhaps that is in, let me just do a quick check.
I'm sorry, this one. So I thought this was one of the discourse that the Buddha gave to his Sakya client at one point.
I wonder if that's the beginning of the Charya Pitaka.
And there I also have a second question, please.
Yeah.
So what would be if a disciple hypothetically approach the Buddha and ask about the two, to become a Buddha or to become a Savaka,
Yeah.
and attain enlightenment, what might be Buddha's guidance to an ordinary or just an average devotee?
You know, I find it rather puzzling that within the corpus of early Buddhism, whether in the Pali tradition or even, I think, in the Chinese translations of the Agamas, we don't find any suttas in which a disciple comes to the Buddha and says, Bhante, what are the prerequisites for attaining, my aspiration is to become a Sammasambuddha. What are the prerequisites for attaining Buddhahood? We just don't find a sutta like that. And I find that somewhat puzzling, that there is no such sutta. I remember long ago, I had asked my own teacher, the Venerable Balangoda Ananda Maitreya, that question. And his answer was that a bodhisattva who's going to achieve, who has the or a person who has the aspiration to achieve Buddhahood has to figure it all out by himself. But to my mind, that raises still the further question that, well, if he has to figure it all out for himself, why don't we see him asking the Buddha that question? And then the Buddha says, I'm not going to answer that for you, since you have to figure that out for yourself. Yeah, so it's just a question. I just don't know the answer to that.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, I think I already answered Marcel's question, so let me take Ravi Karunaratna first. Ravi?
Thank you, Bhante. Bhante, the question I have is, on the Dasaparamita, the 10 perfections,
Yeah.
Does not include Karuna and Mudita. Is that included in the Sila, in the 10 perfections? Because you said the
it's not
included in the 10.
It's not specifically mentioned in the 10 paramitas, Karuna and Mudita. But I understand, my understanding would be that when metta is mentioned as a paramita, then it almost implies, along with metta, karuna and mudita. And then you have metta, the first of the 4 Brahmaviharas, and upekkha, the 4th of the 4 Brahmaviharas. And so it seems sort of implied in between the two would be karuna and mudita. But maybe they thought that the formulators of the scheme took 10 to be a neater number than 12. And so they just kept it at 10. Yeah, but certainly we could almost understand.
But there's another yes.
No, I was just going to say, certainly we could understand.
But there's another.
Go on.
There's another question. They say that when what's his name, Sumedha, wanted to become a Buddha, at that time they say the stream of consciousness that was Jasodhara was also there.
The what?
And that she had
the stream of consciousness.
Jasodhara.
Oh, I see.
Who become
Okay.
Jasodhara later in life.
Okay.
Was also there, and she had. Is there any validity to that story?
Yeah, that comes in a number of accounts. So the way it's related, probably there are numerous versions of the story with different little minor variations. But she was a flower girl. That is, she was like selling or giving away flowers to people to offer to the Buddha as he came walking down the road. And so then when she saw Sumedha lying down, or maybe she gave it to him before he prostrated himself on the road, or maybe after, I don't remember, but she gave him a bunch of lotus flowers. And then Sumedha offered those flowers to the Buddha. And when Sumedha offered the flowers to the Buddha, then that girl, she made the determination in her mind that this was when Dipankara gave Sumedha the prediction of future Buddhahood, then she made the aspiration or the vow in her mind that wherever Sumedha is reborn in the future, if he's going to live the household life, that she will become his wife. And then when he achieves it, when he enters his last existence, she will again become his wife. And so then she became, when he became Siddhartha, the son of the Sakyan family, she became his wife under the name Yasodhara. So that's a common story in many different Buddhist traditions.
Thank
Okay,
you,
Marcel,
Bhante.
did you have another question?
Yes,
No, that's
Bhante.
it.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yes, Bhante, I have one more question.
Yeah.
I actually had a similar question to what Bhante has brought up just now. As I recall, Venerable Sariputta made an aspiration to be a chief disciple of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question was like, why don't he made an aspiration to become a Buddha instead?
Yeah, this is kind of another interesting question. And we find this to be quite a common incident in the background stories behind those who become chief disciples and great disciples of our Buddha, Gautama Buddha. The commentaries, we don't find the stories in the sutta text themselves, but in the commentaries, which are probably inheriting them from an old oral tradition, that each of these disciples will observe under the period of an earlier Buddha. They observe a particular disciple, and it's a disciple who correspond to their sexual identity. So that in the case of the males, they observe a male disciple. In the case of women, they will just observe a female disciple. And then somehow their mind gets deeply impressed and inspired by that particular disciple. And then they form the vow or the determination or aspiration to achieve arhatship under a future Buddha in the role of that disciple who deeply impresses them. So in the case of Sariputta, the Venerable Sariputta, under some earlier Buddha, let's see, I think it goes back before, I'd have to look in the book to find the name of that Buddha. It goes back before Padmuttara. Anyway, during the time of some earlier Buddha, he saw the chief disciple of that Buddha, and he saw the Buddha praise that chief, the one who was the chief disciple in wisdom. And so he was so impressed by that chief disciple that his mind just somehow turned to that disciple as his model. And so he formed the aspiration in the time of a future Buddha, may I become the chief disciple who excels in wisdom. And so he became Sariputta. And, and then there was somebody else who saw the chief disciple who excelled in psychic powers. And then he formed the aspiration to become a chief disciple who excels in psychic powers. And in the future, or in our time, he becomes the chief disciple, Mahamoggallana. Then there was, say, another lay disciple during the time of an earlier Buddha who saw a disciple who was personal attendant of the Buddha and who was very distinguished with his learning. And when he saw that disciple, then he formed the aspiration to become the personal attendant of a future Buddha and to excel in learning. And as time went by, he became the disciple, the monk Ananda. And then there were female disciples who saw particular nuns, the one distinguished in wisdom, the one distinguished in psychic powers, the one distinguished in ascetic practices, in upholding the Vinaya, other qualities. and they each form the aspiration during the time of a future Buddha, may I become the bhikkhuni, the nun who excels in that quality. And then under the time of our Buddha, they become that bhikkhuni. Okay, any other questions?
Bhante, just a quick one. Was Bhante referring to Bhikkhu Analayo just now?
I don't mention particular names.
Okay. Thanks, Bhante.
Okay, Vinyu, we can make this the last question.
Yes, I recall that Dalai Lama actually said that the next Buddha will be a woman. So does that mean that Maitreya will be a woman?
I don't think the Dalai Lama said that the next Buddha will be a woman. I believe because the Tibetans have also the same tradition. And I'm sorry, this isn't from a kind of patriarchal point of view, but it's just what is said in the text, that the one who takes on the role of being the Sammasambuddha, the universal teacher or the world teacher, is always a male. So I don't think, and the Tibetans have that same tradition. So I'm almost certain that the Dalai Lama would not have said that the next Buddha will be a male, will be a woman. I believe what he said is that it's possible that the next Dalai Lama could be a female.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, thank you. Okay, right. Thank you. Right. Can I ask another question regarding
Okay.
Xuanzang?
Regarding what?
The Xuanzang, I think during the Tang Dynasty there was a very famous monk called Xuanzang.
Yeah, I know Xuanzang. Yeah.
When he passed away, I mean, there was an account saying that he went to Tusita heaven.
Okay.
And he wanted to support Maitreya.
Okay.
So, and also, like, I think Queen Malika and also Queen Maya probably also in Tusita heaven. Does that mean that when the next Buddha has been reborn in this world, so all these people will come down together with him?
Yeah, that I can't say for sure. But the Venerable Xuanzang would have had a special connection with Maitreya because this is in the Mahayana tradition. It's believed that Maitreya was the one who transmitted through the Indian monk Asanga the teachings which became the foundation for the Yogacara school of Mahayana philosophy. And Xuanzang was an adherent of the Yogacara system of philosophy. And so he would have probably aspired to be reborn in the Tusita world in order to become a member of the entourage surrounding the future Buddha Maitreya. Okay, we'll have to end now for the day, and we'll end with the sharing of the merits. So I will recite the verses for sharing the merits, and you can radiate the loving kindness, sharing the merits with the devas in the heavenly realms, and also the earth-dwelling devas, the nagas or dragon spirits, the bhutas, the fair spirits, and with all sentient beings. And again, let us direct our special loving kindness and concern to the country of Myanmar. The last I heard, the military has shot and killed over 700 people. Just people who were peacefully protesting against the takeover of the government. And so let us hope that the military junta will step down from their position and that a truly democratic government representing all of the ethnic and religious groups in Myanmar will take over the administration of the country. Okay, so I'll recite the verses in Pali, and you generate and extend the loving kindness. Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanam. Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanam. Akasata Chabumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Dukkha Pata Chani Dukkha Baya Pata Chani Baya Soka Pata Chani Soka Antu Sabepi Panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. Okay, and then we can
Sadhu,
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 sadhu, sadhu. And a bow to Bhante.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
three.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. Okay, wait.
Good health to you, Bhante.
Yeah. Okay, before ending, I just want to mention. Yeah, I just want to mention before everybody leaves, one upcoming event not through BOWS, but this will be through the Buddhist Global Relief. We'll be having over the Memorial Day weekend. It's May 29th, 30th, 31st, a three-day retreat on the Brahma Viharas, on loving kindness, compassion, and altruistic joy and equanimity. So please, if you're interested to participate, it'll be online over Zoom. So go to the website of Buddhist Global Relief, and from there you'll get directed to the registration for the Brahma Vihara retreat. Okay, so thank you all for joining. And next week I should mention we won't be having the class next week. So the next class will be 2 Saturdays from today. That will be, I think, May 1st. Okay. Okay. And then we'll get to number 128.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Have a good
Take
day.
care, Bhante. Be safe, be well.
Okay, thank you.
Bhante. Good health to you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bhante. Thank you.
Sadhu, Bhante, sadhu.
Okay.
love you.
Okay.
Yes, we love you.
Okay. I'm going to stop the recording.
Take it easy, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bye-bye.